I always noticed when the dishwasher made that small clink at the end of its cycle. It used to mean the plates were ready for Easter brunch, the table would soon smell of glaze and cinnamon, and someone would yell from the hallway, "Mom, are we out of napkins again?" This year it meant nothing, just a sound in an empty kitchen bouncing off tile and glass. The tulips had opened more than I expected. I'd picked the yellow ones not because I liked them best, but because Courtney once said they made her feel awake. I placed them in the center of the dining table anyway, even though there would be no guests. The vase was a wedding gift, crystal slightly chipped along the base, where Harold once set it down too hard after an argument that neither of us won. I had just finished dusting the edge of the counter when my phone buzzed. I thought it might be Emily, my granddaughter from Ryan's first marriage. But it wasn't. It was Facebook. A photo had gone up. It took me a moment to recognize Lindsay's kitchen. The new backsplash. The brushed gold light fixtures she said were a splurge. In the photo, they all stood behind a long dining table. Ryan, Courtney, Lindsay, both of her girls, even Ryan's youngest, Caleb, whom I hadn't seen since December. The cake was mine. Same bundt pan. Same heavy glaze pooling at the base because I always poured while it was still warm. That recipe took 3 days to make if you wanted it right. The one in the photo looked undercooked at the center. There were wine glasses, place cards, cloth napkins. Someone had even printed menus white cardstock with gold ribbon. Lindsay was holding one up like a prize. The caption read, "So thankful for family this Easter. Just missing Courtney's parents. See you next month." There was no mention of me. I stared at the screen a long time. Not in disbelief, this had been coming for a while, but in a kind of stillness that felt like someone else's silence settling into my chest. I checked the time. 6:22 p.m. I went to the oven anyway and took the fruitcake out. It had finished baking 30 minutes earlier. I let it cool, ran a knife around the edges, and turned it onto a plate. It slipped out clean, no cracks. That was something. I called Lindsay, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave one. Not 5 minutes passed before Ryan's name lit up. But it wasn't a call. Just a text. "We figured the drive might be too much, Mom. It's loud here. You deserve rest. Take it easy, okay?" No punctuation at the end. That was new. I placed the phone screen down beside the sink. The back of the case had a small crack right under the camera lens. I'd been meaning to replace it but hadn't gotten around to it. Maybe I wouldn't. I sat down at the table, still set for one. I hadn't planned it that way, but the other places had remained empty. The yellow tulips leaned slightly toward the window. I remembered one Easter maybe 10 years ago, when Caleb refused to eat anything green, and Ryan whispered across the table, "Mom, can't you just give him bread?" You know how Courtney feels about food discipline. I'd smiled, sliced him a corner of the fruitcake, and never said a word. That was before I realized Courtney's preferences had quietly become rules, and mine suggestions. No one had told me there was a new tradition this year. No one said there was a dinner at Lindsay's. They used to at least pretend it was a group decision. Now it was just done. I picked up a napkin from the sideboard drawer. The fabric had a small brown dot near the hem, coffee maybe years old. I folded it carefully, even though no one would use it. The knife on my plate reflected the room back at me in a blurred line chair legs. Cabinet edges, a sliver of my face. My lipstick had faded. I remembered Harold once said, "You wear lipstick to breakfast like someone's watching." He meant it as a compliment. I thought of that line every time I set the table for holidays. Lipstick before meals. Napkins ironed. Cake with the glaze poured too soon. That was how I showed up. This year they hadn't noticed I wasn't there. No one called the day before to ask if I'd need help with the folding chairs. No one mentioned church. No one even asked what I was bringing, and still they had my cake. I scrolled through the comments. Courtney's friend. Looks perfect. You're such a hostess, Lindsay. Someone else. That cake is gorgeous. Did you make it? Lindsay replied with a heart emoji. That was all. The dishwasher beeped again. I hadn't started it. It was just letting me know it was done, waiting. I opened a bottle of seltzer water and poured it into a short glass with a lemon wedge. A habit I kept from the days I stopped drinking wine after Harold passed. I no longer craved the wine, but I still liked the shape of the glass. The phone buzzed again. Another message, same thread. We'll do something smaller next weekend, just us. Maybe brunch. Sound good? It wasn't a question. I didn't reply. There were more words in the message than there had been at Christmas when they'd texted at 4:18 p.m. Traffic's bad. We might not make it. Love you. They hadn't made it. No follow-up. I folded the phone into a dish towel and tucked it in the drawer next to the bottle opener. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass panes, soft and slow, like it didn't want to disturb anything. The tulips began to curl inward. They always did that at night. I looked at the fruitcake again. Still whole. Still warm. No one had mentioned me at that dinner, and I wasn't sure if I was more surprised by that, or by how quiet it felt in here without anyone lying about it. The first time I noticed I was becoming smaller in the room was during carpool. Ryan had just started that new job, something with firm names strung together, all consonants, and I offered to pick up Caleb from school twice a week. I didn't mind the drive. The route was familiar. The parking lot shaded by old sycamores, and the front office ladies still remembered my name from when I used to volunteer on Tuesdays. One afternoon, while buckling Caleb into the back seat of my car, Ryan leaned down, glanced at the dashboard, and said, "Maybe it's time you thought about something a little more presentable. You're pulling into a line of Teslas with that thing." That thing was a beige sedan, 6 years old, paid off, no dents. I nodded. The next week, I traded it in for a newer model, white hybrid quiet. I didn't ask him what he thought. The receipt from the dealership is still in my tax folder, tucked between my will and the repair invoice from when I got rear-ended outside the Whole Foods. I've kept a lot of papers over the years. Proof of decisions no one asked me to make, but still expected me to. Lindsay once mentioned her daughter had an ear for melody. Not a declaration, just a passing comment during a Sunday brunch. 2 weeks later, I transferred money into her account, enough to cover a mid-range upright piano and a year's worth of lessons. She texted a heart emoji, nothing more. I never brought it up again. When they posted the recital video online, the caption read, "Thank you to Aunt Courtney for inspiring Ella to love music." I watched the video on mute. That Christmas I made dinner. Roast lamb stuffing with sage and apple, the kind of cranberry sauce that needs to be stirred for an hour or it goes too thick. Courtney brought a salad in a plastic container. She took pictures of everything, plates, place settings, the centerpiece I'd arranged with cedar and dried orange peel. Later that night, I saw the photos on her Instagram. There were 11 pictures. I was in none of them. In one, you could see my sleeve. Barely. Burgundy, knit a bit frayed at the cuff. I'd worn it because Harold once said it made me look like autumn. Courtney once told me it might be helpful if I stepped back a little. Her tone was polite, her words measured. She said something about boundaries, about children needing independence, about how too much grandmothering could blur their sense of routine. You understand, right? It's about developmental space. I nodded. The next time Caleb asked if I could come to his soccer game, I told him I had errands. It was easier that way. I didn't want to be the kind of mother or grandmother who lingered. I'd seen them before. Women whose usefulness had expired, but who refused to leave the stage. I didn't want to be clinging to the edges of things not meant for me anymore. So I folded back. There was a moment 3 years ago when I almost didn't. Courtney had been between jobs. She'd hinted at trouble with the rent. Ryan called one evening and said they were trying to stay afloat just for a few weeks. I wired $5,000 the next day. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the fifth. But that time, I asked 2 months later over the phone. Not accusing, just curious. I never got a receipt, I said. Was the rent okay? There was a pause, a long one. Then Ryan's voice clipped, "If this is going to be transactional now, maybe we should reconsider asking you for help at all." I apologized. He didn't say anything after that for a while. Not silence exactly, just distance. The kind that stretches across phone calls, holidays, whole seasons. I remember signing a birthday card for Courtney that year and hesitating before writing "with love." Not because I didn't mean it, but because I didn't know if it would read as sincere. I wrote it anyway, in cursive. I don't know when I began measuring my words like teaspoons, when a comment about weather became too neutral, when a question about school lunches became an intrusion. I stopped giving opinions on anything. Paint colors, school zones, restaurants, clothes. If they asked, I smiled. If they didn't, I kept still. Ryan once mentioned I was easy to be around. It was during a Sunday visit. The kids were loud, the television was on. Courtney was folding laundry in the living room, and I was refilling water glasses. He didn't say it like a compliment, more like a fact. Something slightly below praise, but better than being difficult. "You're simple, Mom, not in a bad way. You don't cause problems." I nodded. Later that night, I stood at the sink with my hands in lukewarm water, and I couldn't remember if anyone had thanked me for dinner. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with the faded embroidered pears, and folded it carefully along the seam, the way my mother used to when she wanted something to look new again. I've kept that towel. It's stiff in places, stained in others, but it folds neatly. Like me, it takes up less space when no one is looking. Some nights I walk past the hall mirror and catch a glimpse of myself, not full on, just a shoulder, a wrist, a part of a sleeve. Sometimes I stop. Sometimes I don't. But when I do, I wonder what it would sound like to take up the whole frame. I've never raised my voice in that house. Not once. Not during an argument. Not during an oversight. Not even when I was asked politely not to speak so much during dinner, because the kids need to finish fast. I think I believed for a while that being easy meant being essential. That if I didn't ask for anything, they'd remember to give. That if I stayed out of the way, they'd notice the absence and miss the weight of it. But the thing about being quiet is eventually people forget there was ever a voice at all. I never threw away the box, though I've thought about it many times. It's a long, narrow tin once used to hold Christmas cookies, the kind that always tasted faintly of the metal they sat in. The paint is chipped along the edges, and the lid doesn't close clean anymore. Still, I keep it in the linen closet behind the spare hand towels no one uses. Inside, there are cards, notes, ticket stubs, bits of paper that should mean nothing by now, but I've folded each one back into shape more times than I can count. The top card has a drawing of a dog wearing a party hat. Glitter on the hat has rubbed off onto the envelope. There's a child's handwriting inside "Happy Birthday, I hope you like the thing." No name. No love, Caleb. Just that sentence. The toy had been from me. I knew because I wrapped it, taped it twice, and tied the ribbon 3 times before deciding to untie and redo it all. Below that is a finger painting. Bold streaks of blue and green, and a figure in the center labeled Daddy. Then mommy arms stretched wide. In the corner, a round figure with big sunglasses and yellow hair, Nana Janine, Courtney's mother. The one who moved to Charleston, but still seemed to be in every school play, every Sunday roast, every Instagram caption. No other names. I remember Courtney once said, "Kids draw what they see most," and I nodded even then. The ribbon from Lindsay's graduation is still pressed flat between the pages of an old recipe book I stopped using after Harold passed. I tied it there the night she walked the stage in that stiff blue gown. I had stayed up for 2 nights sewing the hem of her dress, replacing a zipper that had split across the back, trimming the sleeves, because she said it made her look childish otherwise. When they called her name and she stepped up, the crowd clapped. She turned to the microphone and said, "To my mother-in-law, thank you for being the quiet strength behind me this year. I wouldn't have made it without your support." Courtney's mother had not been there. I had ironed the dress that morning. The applause sounded louder after that. I closed the recipe book slowly that night. I didn't move the ribbon. I just kept my hand on the cover a moment longer, as if pressing it shut would hold something else down too. There's a onesie in the box folded so many times the cotton has thinned at the seams. Pale blue with tiny white buttons shaped like stars. I sent it to Courtney when Caleb was born. The package had no note, just the tag still attached, so she could exchange it if she needed to. 2 weeks later, she posted a video, white wrapping paper torn open, her voice cheerful. "Oh, Sarah, you know me too well. This is perfect." Sarah, I remember the invoice from that boutique, $48 plus shipping. The kind of gift you send to feel useful when you're not invited to the hospital. They say it's better to give without expectation. I never expected parades or plaques. Just maybe now and then a mention. A name softly said in the middle of a room. Nothing loud. Just presence. Ryan once told Caleb, "You can call her Gran if you want. Or just Penny. Whatever feels natural, natural." I read that word once on a greeting card I never sent. Thanks for being my natural support system. It didn't sound like something anyone actually said out loud. When Emily was younger, she used to call me Grandma Pen. I liked that one. It sounded accidental and affectionate. She stopped calling when her mother moved away, and the visits stopped. I found a Post-it once on the refrigerator at Lindsay's. Courtney had written it in marker. "Ella, remember only 2 cookies, brush teeth, and call Nana if scared." The number scribbled below was Charleston's area code. There was a magnet holding it in place, one of those shaped like a chicken wearing an apron. I remember tracing my thumb across it, wondering if anyone still used my landline or if they'd removed me from the emergency list too. Not long after, I got a Christmas card signed by all of them, but the name was printed. "With warm wishes, the Whitakers." A generic greeting, no handwriting. The return address label read, "The Langston family." That's Courtney's side. I kept the envelope. It's in the box, along with a napkin from Caleb's 3rd birthday green with dinosaurs. I wasn't there that year. They said it would be just kids and young energy. I mailed a puzzle. Wooden with letters. Courtney texted a thumbs up emoji. That was all. I don't think people mean to erase others. It's quieter than that. Like turning down a volume so slowly you don't notice when it's gone. One day, you're speaking into a room that still feels full, and the next, you're mouthing words no one reads. It's strange what people remember to say. Ryan once leaned in at a party, handed me his glass, and said, "Do you mind rinsing this out? You're closest to the kitchen." I was. Lindsay's youngest drew a family tree for a school project. I saw a photo of it taped to the fridge. She'd written everyone's name in bubble letters, even the pets. The lower right branch was empty. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to hear my name said the way people say it, when they mean it, like the way you say a word you haven't heard in years and realize it still fits in your mouth. The ring on my hand is loose now. Not from weight loss, just time. I twist it when I read old messages. Most of them are from banks or dental appointments. No one signs off anymore, just initials or nothing. There's a silence that feels soft like snow. And there's the kind that settles behind your eyes, like forgetting where you placed something, but knowing you'll never find it again. In that box, there's nothing cruel, nothing loud, just the faint outline of someone who used to be included, now blurred at the edges. I once thought names were permanent things. Turns out they fade faster than paper. I never liked the way linen sticks to the back of your knees on a restaurant chair. It always reminds me of clothes that look expensive but feel like paper when you wear them too long. That night the chair had a high back, tufted in cream, and the silverware weighed more than it needed to. Courtney picked the place. Of course she did. The name was in French, but the menu had no accents, just numbers in a long column without dollar signs. The server poured sparkling water before I sat down, and Ryan didn't look up from his phone until after I unfolded the napkin. Courtney adjusted her necklace. She wore beige again, her version of subtle. "It's good to slow down once in a while," she said, pressing her elbows gently to the table like someone being photographed. Ryan nodded. "It's been a crazy quarter. I haven't even seen the inside of a gym since January." The waiter brought wine. I didn't order it, but a glass appeared anyway. "We've been talking," Courtney said, slicing a scallop in half and letting the edge of her fork clink lightly against the plate. "Not just about work. About us. About what we need." Ryan leaned back. Time away. Disconnected. Just the two of us. A chance to reset. They said the word vacation like it was medicine. Something prescribed. Something necessary. Courtney picked up her phone, opened an image, and held it out toward me. Azure Dunes. In Dubai. Private villas, spa treatments, ocean view, everything. It's a place to remember what we actually like about each other. I nodded once. The kind people use when they haven't been asked anything but don't want to interrupt. "There's a package," Ryan added. 7 days. First-class flights. We'd leave early June. Courtney smiled. "We wouldn't ask if it weren't meaningful. You've always believed in investing in family." She used the word investing like it had nothing to do with numbers. I folded the corner of my napkin while they talked. She mentioned sea salt therapy. He mentioned the exchange rate. The wine glass had a slight lip on one side like it had been chipped and polished down. "We know it's a lot," Courtney said, resting her hand lightly over mine. Her nails were a soft, pink, perfect hollow. Ryan added, "But you always said memories matter more than money. We thought maybe this could be your gift to us. Something lasting." My hands stayed where they were, still holding the napkin's edge. I nodded again. Not yes, just acknowledgement. By the time dessert came, they were already talking about luggage. I paid the bill while they stepped out to call the babysitter. The total flashed briefly on the screen, $320.76. No tip line, just a prompt to insert the card. At home, I peeled off my shoes in the hallway. The left one left a faint scuff on the wood, just under the coat hook I never use anymore. I put the receipt in a drawer beneath the phone charger. I washed the glass I hadn't drunk from. I set the house alarm, even though the neighborhood has been quiet for years. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a notification from the bank. A charge had posted to my primary account. $27,800. No description. Just a merchant ID and the word travel. I sat down on the stool by the counter and tapped through the details. First-class flights. Prepaid hotel. Non-refundable. There was a separate charge for private marine transport, which I assumed meant boats. A minute later, Ryan's text arrived. "Thanks again, Mom. Knew we could count on you. No emoji, No question mark, just certainty. The ceramic mug I kept by the sink still had a ring of tea around the bottom. I hadn't rinsed it out. The spoon inside had dried to the shape of its last stir. I didn't call him. I didn't call the bank. I didn't move. I stared at the numbers like they might change if I watched long enough. Not long after Harold passed, Ryan came over to help me with the insurance paperwork. He brought Courtney with him. She stood by the mantel, looking at the urn I hadn't chosen yet, and said, "It's strange when someone leaves behind everything, and yet you're still left with nothing, isn't it?" I'd nodded. Because what else could I have done? The kitchen was dark except for the phone's glow. The number didn't change. The date was still today. The clock ticked once behind me. I remembered when Harold rewired it himself because the chime was too loud. Now it barely made a sound. Just a whisper, once every hour. I opened the bank app again. I looked at the remaining balance. Enough to live on. Enough to cover groceries and taxes and a few more quiet years. But now, a hole sat in the middle of it, a place I hadn't agreed to carve out. Courtney once said I had a way of making people feel guilty without saying anything. She said it during a barbecue just after I'd brought over potato salad without onions because Lindsay didn't like the crunch. "You don't have to play martyr," she said, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "It's a little manipulative." I hadn't answered. I just stood by the grill holding the lid open while the smoke curled past us like something escaping. Now the smoke wasn't pretend, it was a number. A ticket. A hotel room I'd never see. A towel folded by someone else's hands. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't been told. I had been assumed. That was the part I kept looking at. Not the number. Not the total. Just the gap between them asking and them taking. The invisible moment where permission disappeared. I closed the app. Set the phone face down. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and went quiet. The spoon in the mug hadn't moved. And I realized that silence, when chosen, feels different than silence placed upon you. I never used to drink coffee from the ceramic mug with the crack down the side. Harold chipped it in '03, said he'd glue it back together, but never did. It held heat poorly and stained easily. Still that morning, I filled it without thinking. I didn't rush. I placed the mug on the countertop, let the steam rise, and watched it settle like breath against a window. The light through the kitchen blinds cut my reflection into pieces. I looked older in that light, or maybe just sharper. The coat I wore hadn't left the closet in months. Long charcoal wool, the kind with a lining that rustles when you move. I buttoned it slowly, even though I wasn't going outside. There's something about the weight of a proper coat that makes the spine straighten. The laptop took its time to start. I let it. No music, no television. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick from the vent. I typed Emirates customer service and waited for the chat window to load. "I need to report an unauthorized purchase," I typed. "Booking reference, I don't have it. But I have the charge. Was this ticket purchased for you? No." It was not. I stayed polite. No backstory, no explanation. Just facts, given with the same tone one might use to read off ingredients. Next came the resort. Azure Dunes had a booking portal with gold borders and soft fonts, like the inside of a high-end gift box. I selected Cancel Reservation. Reason transaction not authorized by cardholder. No confirmation required, just a spinning wheel. Then your cancellation has been received. I didn't call Ryan. I didn't message Courtney. Instead, I clicked through to my bank portal. Fraud Reporting tab. Scanned and uploaded the screenshots. I used the digital highlighter to mark Ryan's message. "Thanks again, Mom. I included the timestamp. The bank flagged both charges as suspicious. I confirmed. I selected freeze all linked accounts. That included the joint card I opened for Ryan during his 3rd year of college. He said it was for emergencies. Eventually, it became automatic. Recurring charges. I never reviewed tiny streams of money flowing outward. I sat still and watched as the confirmation emails began to arrive. The last thing I did was open my old contacts and search for Marjorie Lane. She still had the same email, mlanelegal@privatefirm.us. Subject line: Need to discuss unauthorized transfer. Body Marjorie. I hope you're well. I believe my son and his wife used my account without my consent. I'd like to explore my legal rights. I no longer wish to be passive about this. Thank you. Her reply came within the hour. Penny. I'm sorry to hear this, but I'm glad you reached out. Let's start with documentation. Texts, emails, banking records. Save everything. I'll guide you from there. I closed the laptop. The coffee had cooled. I sipped anyway. It tasted metallic, like the inside of an old kettle. I turned off the stove even though nothing was on it. I wiped down the counters with slow, even strokes. The silence in the house didn't press down on me the way it used to. By noon, 2 messages had arrived. First from Ryan. What's going on? The flights were canceled. The resort, too. Then from Courtney. Seriously. You could have just told us if you had a change of heart. Now everything's a mess. Neither used my name. Neither asked if I was okay. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of the ones I'd said before had mattered. I folded the phone in my hands like something delicate. Set it face down on the table. I'd done that often in the past, out of politeness, at dinners, at birthday parties, at school plays. I thought putting the phone away meant I was present. Now it meant something else. A quiet refusal. A door closed without sound. The last Christmas I hosted, I made handmade crackers for the kids. Filled them with riddles, soft candies, stickers. Courtney smiled tightly when she opened hers and said, "Oh, you still do these?" She didn't mean it as gratitude, just nostalgia framed as inconvenience. That memory passed through me like fog, weightless, but everywhere. I gathered the documents into a single folder on my desktop. Ryan Courtney transfers. I gave it a red tag. Marjorie would appreciate that. She likes things color-coded. I deleted nothing. Sometimes the only power left is in record-keeping. I went to the mailbox that afternoon. The wind had knocked over the trash bin next door. I left it. Someone else's balance to restore. Inside the box, a flyer, 2 credit card offers, and a handwritten envelope from a women's cancer center. Likely a donation request. I'd given once 4 years ago in memory of someone I never met. I brought it inside and placed it next to the coffee mug. I didn't open it. I listened to the radiator rattle once and stop. The clock in the hallway ticked without rhythm. A draft moved past my knee, too slight to bother closing the window. They might call again. They might write long messages. They might say things like, "You're overreacting," or "It was just a misunderstanding," or "Why would you hurt us like this?" But none of that had happened yet, and I felt no urgency to meet it. The phone lit up again around 5. I didn't check the screen. Some people imagine resistance as shouting. Others think it requires storming out, slamming doors, making speeches. Mine looked like a bank form with my signature, a coat I buttoned fully, a single mug left unwashed in the sink. They had taken what they assumed they could. I had simply chosen to stop handing them the tray. The phone stopped buzzing. The house stayed still. And in that stillness, I didn't feel absence. I felt something closer to return. Some people think silence is empty. I've found it to be exact. There were footsteps on the front porch that morning, 2 sets uneven in rhythm. I had left the blinds angled just enough to see without being seen. Courtney had a folder in her hand. Ryan wore his old university sweatshirt, the one I bought during orientation, now too tight in the shoulders. I didn't move until the doorbell rang. The handle turned twice, then knocking harder than it needed to be. "Mom, we're not here to argue." My fingers stayed loose at my sides. I had nothing to grip. "We're just trying to understand. I mean, who cancels a family trip like that after everything's paid?" I didn't answer. They hadn't asked a question that needed one. Courtney's voice followed. Firm clipped. "Mothers support their children. That's what this is. You always paid for the holidays, the back-to-school shopping. This isn't different. It's your role." I released the latch on the lock just enough to speak through the door. "You took from me without permission. That's not a role. That's theft." There was a pause, too brief for reflection, too long for grace. She muttered something to Ryan, too soft to catch. He didn't respond. I closed the latch again. The sound was quiet. It didn't echo. They stayed a few moments longer. Courtney knocked once more, lighter this time. Then nothing. Just the creak of the steps as they left. I waited 5 minutes before I moved. Not out of fear, but to be sure I wouldn't speak again. At the kitchen table, I placed my checkbook beside the laptop. The pen I used was one Harold once brought home from a conference. Black ink, heavy barrel, the kind that left an imprint even if the page was blank. I transferred every cent from the joint account into a new one I had opened 3 days earlier. The bank teller, a woman with tired eyes and maroon nails, didn't ask why I was closing the account. She simply slid the form across the desk. "Would you like it in your name only?" I had nodded once. Back at home, I tore up the debit card Ryan still used. The pieces fit neatly into the trash. No ceremony, just one less connection. That afternoon, the house stayed quiet. No phone calls, no buzzing text alerts, no forwarded links to school fundraisers, or casual reminders that someone's birthday was coming up soon. I made soup, nothing fancy, just carrots, broth, onion. The spoon rested on the edge of the pot, and I let it drip instead of wiping it. The sound was steady, like a clock. In the garden, the lavender I thought had died began to green again. Not much, but enough to notice. I brought out the worn folding chair from the shed and sat beside the planter. A book in my lap unopened. The pages had curled from last summer's heat. I didn't read. I just held it. The breeze shifted once, carrying the scent of tomato vines and something faintly sweet. I couldn't place it. The old wind chime near the back door stirred soft, uncertain notes. One hung lower than the rest, bent from a storm years ago. I'd meant to fix it. Now I wasn't sure I would. By evening, Marjorie's email came through. The subject line, "Initial draft," reporting of unauthorized transactions plus fraud intent. I printed it. Not because I needed a hard copy, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the paper. Reading it felt strange. The words were legal clean without sentiment. But I saw myself between the lines. Page 2 required a signature. I found the line, read the wording again. I, the undersigned, confirm that the above is accurate to my knowledge. I signed with the same pen. No tremor in my hand, no hesitation. There had been a time I couldn't have done that. Not because I didn't believe in my own version of events, but because I thought clarity would cost me love. Now I understood. Love taken under condition is not love returned. Later, I received a message from Lindsay. A voice note, 43 seconds. She sounded breathless, like she'd recorded it between errands. "Grandma, I heard there was some drama. Dad's been weird lately. Just wanted to say hi, I guess. Hope you're doing okay, or whatever. Courtney's kind of..." Never mind. I didn't reply. I listened again, though. Twice. That night I walked through the living room and noticed how still it had become. The framed photos on the shelf hadn't moved, but they looked different, like objects in a museum someone had forgotten to dust. The one with Ryan at age 5 holding a fishing rod too big for him was tilted. I didn't fix it. Some part of me had always expected an apology would come wrapped in good intentions. A letter, a phone call, a moment when someone says, "I see what we did." But sometimes nothing comes. And in that space, something else begins. I folded the signed document and slid it into an envelope. Placed it by the door for mailing. No music played. No candle burned. Just the low hum of the fridge again. I took off my coat, hung it neatly, and ran my hand over the seams. The stitch near the collar had frayed slightly. It would hold. I didn't say goodnight to anyone. I didn't rehearse what I'd say next. Instead, I looked at the wind chime one last time and let the silence settle, not as punishment, not as loneliness, but as proof that I still had something that belonged to me. And I didn't owe it away. Not anymore. Some things taste different when no one expects you to share. I opened the website around midnight. The same link Ryan had once left open on my tablet, half loaded with glossy images of marble bathtubs and infinity pools. I hadn't meant to look. I only wanted to check the weather, but there it was. Azure dunes still blinking like an invitation someone forgot to cancel. I didn't rush. I scrolled past every option I recognized. Same resort, same sweet name, same price. My finger hovered over the Book Now button longer than it needed to. The chair I sat in creaked when I leaned back. Its fabric was frayed near the seams, but it held. The edge of the kitchen table had a pale ring from a coffee mug, faint but permanent. I didn't wipe it away. I chose the presidential suite. First-class flight. 7 nights. Full spa access. No family package. No companion name required. Just mine. The confirmation number came through in seconds. I wrote it down on the back of a grocery list I no longer needed. Packing didn't take long. I folded 3 linen blouses, 1 long dress, 2 paperbacks, and the silver sandals I never wore to Lindsay's wedding. A sun hat still had its tag. It had waited longer than I realized. At the airport, I didn't ask for help with my luggage. I let the young man at check-in scan my passport without making small talk. When he smiled and pointed toward the first-class lounge, I nodded once and walked on. No one called my name. No one waved from the gate. The flight was quiet. I declined the wine, took the window seat, and watched clouds arrange themselves like slow-moving mountains. I hadn't flown in years. I used to carry Dramamine in my purse for fear of turbulence, but this time I left it behind. When the meal tray came, I took my time. The spoon was too small for the soup, and the butter was hard to spread, but no one rushed me. I noticed that. The linen blouse I wore had a faint wrinkle near the collar. No one pointed it out. I left it be. At the resort, the bellman carried my bag like it weighed nothing. He asked if I was traveling alone. I adjusted my sunglasses not because of the sun, but because it gave me a moment. "I'm here with someone I haven't seen in a long time," I said. He didn't press. The suite had tall windows and a balcony with white railings. There was a fruit basket waiting on the coffee table untouched. I placed the room key beside the bedside lamp and walked to the glass doors. The sea didn't roar. It simply existed. Later in the spa, a woman in a soft accent asked if I preferred calming or invigorating oils. I said calming, and she didn't ask why. Her hands were steady. She worked without small talk. I appreciated that. On the 3rd evening, I sat by the infinity pool and opened one of the paperbacks. I read the same paragraph 3 times and never turned the page. A couple nearby argued in hushed tones over dinner reservations. The woman folded her arms. The man rubbed his forehead. I glanced away and let them disappear. A server brought me a glass of lemon water. She asked if I was waiting for anyone. I shook my head gently. Just enjoying the quiet, I said. She smiled and walked off, shoes barely making a sound on the stone tiles. In the mornings, I took breakfast on the balcony. I sliced mangoes with the dull resort knife and watched the sun lift itself out of the water like it had no memory of yesterday. No one called. No one asked where I'd gone. I visited the resort bookstore one afternoon, mostly to feel the paper in my hands. I didn't buy anything. I noticed a book on the shelf titled The Life You Set Aside. I touched the spine, but left it there. On the 6th day, I passed a couple taking selfies in front of the lobby fountain. The woman laughed in bursts, leaning into the man's chest, her hand flashing a ring that looked heavy. He kissed the top of her head as if cameras weren't watching. I moved aside and let them frame their picture. Behind them, the resort's name stood in gold letters. I didn't read it out loud. The elevator ride back to my floor was empty. I leaned against the railing and looked at my reflection in the mirrored panel. My hair had flattened from the wind. My lips were bare. I looked unsupervised. That night, the concierge called to confirm my transportation to the airport. I thanked her. She asked again if I needed help with bags or escort service through customs. No, I said quietly. It's been a simple trip. In the morning, the receptionist printed my invoice and folded it into a cream envelope. She looked up with a pleasant tone. Traveling back alone, I met her eyes and answered without pause. I arrived alone. I'm not sure I'm returning with the same person. She smiled, polite, unsure. I didn't explain. When I stepped into the waiting car, I glanced once at the lobby entrance. The automatic doors opened, then closed behind no one. My suitcase sat beside me, wheels barely scratched. The silence inside the car reminded me of the one back home, but here it didn't press against my chest. It rested like a coat across my lap. I watched the palm trees pass, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't wonder what someone else would have said. I had heard too many voices over the years, and not enough of my own. So I let the silence answer this time. And it said, "You do not need permission to belong. Not even here. Not even now." Some conversations don't begin with introductions. They begin with a glance, a breath, the way someone sets their glass down. At the far end of the long dining table, I noticed her before she spoke. Silver earrings shaped like leaves, the kind that move even when their wearer doesn't. Her hair cut short carried the kind of softness that came from no longer needing to impress anyone. A linen wrap draped over one shoulder, careless in its elegance. She looked over and nodded once. Not a greeting, just acknowledgement. The menu arrived folded, printed in gold foil. I didn't recognize most of the dishes. I circled one with a pencil they'd left on the table, not because I wanted it, but because it felt like participation. The woman beside me glanced at her menu but didn't open it. My daughter tried to sell my house before I was even finished living in it. No build-up, no apology. She called it a necessary trade-off. Said I could move into one of those wellness centers, and she could finally open her gym. I didn't respond right away. I looked down at my napkin, which had a crease that hadn't quite ironed out. Something about that detail made her voice easier to hear. She reached for her water glass. I told her, "You can't plant a flag in land that's not empty." She didn't like that. I folded the napkin across my lap. She told the realtor I was already declining. The salad arrived. It smelled of fennel and cold peaches. I placed the fork gently on the plate without lifting it. "I understand," I said quietly. Her hand paused above the butter dish. They always think we'll keep folding. I didn't argue. I let the silence fill the space where defense usually lives. My son redirected funds from my account without my knowledge, I said, looking straight ahead. Booked a trip for himself and his wife. Called it a family investment. She didn't blink. And they call us unstable. I traced the edge of my plate with the handle of the knife. We're not unstable, she continued. We're just no longer willing to carry their projections. I looked down at my glass where a fingerprint had fogged the rim. She glanced at me again. You don't seem confused. No, I said. I'm not. She smiled, tired but not defeated. We're not losing our minds, she said. We just woke up late. That night I sat on the balcony alone. The stars didn't look familiar, but they didn't need to. When I returned home, the mail had stacked up against the door. Flyers, invoices, 2 appointment reminders. I sat at the kitchen table and laid each one out in rows. On the corner of one envelope was a smear of pink from the gardenia bush near the mailbox. I didn't brush it off. 3 days later, I walked into the Chapel Hill neurology wing, wearing the same blouse I'd worn to Ryan's college graduation. The sleeves were tighter now, not because the blouse had shrunk, but because I'd changed shape. In some places softer, in others steel. Dr. Naomi Blanchard didn't speak quickly. She let her questions float. I appreciated that. She handed me a clipboard with tasks. Draw a clock, recall a story, name objects in a photograph. I didn't rush. I didn't perform. I'm not here to prove anything I said. I know, she replied. I'm just here to witness. When she handed me the report, she didn't use jargon. Her words were clean, measured. Your cognitive function is not only intact, it's above average for your age. I held the paper between both hands and let its weight settle. You are not impaired, she said. You are simply no longer accommodating. The results smelled faintly of printer toner. I placed them in a manila folder with no label, then slid it into my tote behind a grocery receipt and a clipped recipe for lentil stew. Marjorie read the report at her office without speaking for several minutes. The corner of her lip lifted slightly, but she didn't say, "Congratulations," or "We got them." She only handed me a pen. "They'll accuse you of being confused," she said. "They've already hinted it in the paperwork." I looked at the pen in my hand. It had a bite mark in the cap. I signed the page. "No one expects mothers to be lucid," she added. "They just expect us to forgive." I didn't correct her. Forgiveness was never the issue. When the summons reached Ryan and Courtney's lawyer, they responded with a counterclaim. I skimmed it once. Increased confusion, unreliable memory, emotional instability. My daughter Lindsay left a voicemail the same afternoon. She spoke in a clipped tone I hadn't heard since she was 16. "If you go through with this, you'll destroy what's left of this family. Maybe that's what you want now." I didn't call her back. Instead, I placed the printed report in a clear sleeve. I clipped it to the rest of the court documents. I didn't yell, I didn't explain, I didn't share it on Facebook. I placed it exactly where it needed to go between the pages of accusation and inheritance. They told the world I was declining. I handed the world a different truth, written in ink that didn't smudge. And when the envelope left my hands at the clerk's desk, I didn't flinch. Some things once named do not require repetition. Some proofs are quieter than pain. I had nothing to prove, but I proved it anyway. Some endings don't echo. They simply stop. I sat in the courtroom without crossing my legs, both feet flat on the floor. The wood beneath my shoes had been scrubbed clean, but the scratches still showed faint lines from years of dragging chairs or maybe shoes like mine. I kept my eyes on them. I didn't bring anything to fidget with. My hands stayed on my lap. The judge's voice didn't rise, though the words were sharp enough to slice through the artificial air of that space. Unauthorized access to a senior citizen's financial accounts. Identity misuse. Negligent emotional coercion with aggravating factors. The prosecutor's voice held no malice, just rhythm. My name was mentioned 13 times. Their names Ryan and Courtney, 37. The courtroom felt sterile, like a waiting room built for people who'd already been dismissed. Courtney wore her hair in a high bun. Ryan had shaved, which meant someone had told him appearances still counted. Neither looked in my direction. I didn't expect them to. Not anymore. At one point, Courtney let out a breath through her nose, just loud enough to suggest boredom. The judge adjusted her glasses before speaking again. Full restitution of $27,800. Due within 90 days. She paused, glancing at a form clipped to a folder. 200 hours of community service. Placement will be assigned at Oak Valley Senior Living Facility. I caught it. Ryan did too. His jaw flexed. Mandatory enrollment in a 12-week course. Boundaries and family ethics. I heard someone behind me exhale, maybe relief, maybe judgment. I didn't turn around. I had asked for no statement, no press, no public acknowledgement. I hadn't even invited anyone to sit beside me. The attorney placed a hand flat on the table once, but didn't speak. The photo of Richard sat in a simple wooden frame in front of her, beside the closing argument notes. He looked out of place there, but I had needed him to witness it. They didn't sentence my son to prison. They sentenced him to truth. After the hearing, I stepped into the corridor alone. No one followed. The hallway smelled faintly of copier toner and old carpet glue. I paused near the vending machine, not to buy anything, just to have a place to stand. My phone buzzed 3 times before I reached the street. The screen showed Lindsay. I let it ring once more before pressing answer. I hope this was worth it. Her voice came clipped, like she had practiced it. You humiliated your own son. You didn't even look at him. I waited. You know how hard it is for a man to come back from something like this. I adjusted the strap of my bag, the leather creaking slightly at the seam. I hope you're proud. I hope you feel powerful. A pause. He didn't kill anyone, Mom. He made a mistake. But you made it permanent. I could still hear her breath on the line when I ended the call. Later, I blocked the number. I didn't explain, not even to myself. That night, I climbed the stairs slowly, not out of weakness, but with care. My hand skimmed the banister polished smooth in the center from years of movement. In the hallway closet, I kept a single framed photograph. One of the last ones we had all taken before Richard's diagnosis. Everyone was smiling in different directions. Ryan had a hand on my shoulder. Lindsay stood slightly apart, pretending not to notice the cake leaning too far to one side. I carried the frame upstairs and placed it on the bed. The backing gave way easily. I peeled the tabs back and slid out the picture. It had warped slightly at the corners from humidity. No anger, just deliberation. With one hand, I tore gently along the middle, separating the left edge where Ryan and Lindsay stood. The sound was quiet, almost respectful. I folded the piece once, then again, and placed it in the back of a drawer I no longer opened often. The remaining half I placed in a small envelope tucked behind a book I hadn't read in years. It didn't need to be displayed anymore. It had already served its time. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to grieve. Only things to reorganize. The frame, now empty, leaned against the bedroom wall. I didn't remove it. I didn't replace it. Sometimes the most final act isn't revenge or forgiveness. Sometimes it's choosing not to frame something again. Some people collect stamps, others save wine corks. I've kept silences, long ones folded neatly between years. No calendar marked this new chapter. No balloon, no ceremony. Just air that moved differently through the house. I noticed it most in the mornings. The absence of urgency. No blinking screen. No list of errands authored by someone else. The tea was warm, not hot. I held the cup with both hands, palms curved around the ceramic, like it might speak if I listened long enough. Outside, a breeze pressed gently against the window pane. A slip of white fluttered on the sill, weighted by a small stone. Elaine's handwriting had the uneven elegance of someone who'd once been precise and had learned to let go. "Hi, Penny. I'm planning lavender again today. Come by after 10 if you feel like it." The "if" mattered. Not a suggestion, not an obligation. Just space. Elaine always left space. I folded the note and slid it into the drawer with old warranty cards and orphaned keys. Then I opened the back door and let light fall where it wanted. There were routines, now soft ones. Monday mornings meant watercolor at the community center. I painted slowly, not because I was aiming for accuracy, but because no one was waiting for me to be done. Thursdays, I walked the aisles of the co-op with Elaine, comparing spices we never quite used. Once she asked if I ever missed cooking for someone. I told her I didn't realize I was allowed to miss only parts. Sometimes I still gave advice, real estate questions mostly. A group of single mothers started calling it Penny's Corner at the library. I never asked how they found me. I didn't charge. I didn't stay long. I only gave them the map, not the road. In the yard, the lilac bush had bloomed faster than I expected. Its scent drifted into the kitchen like a memory I didn't mind recalling. I hadn't planted lilacs since college. Back then, I thought they were too delicate to last. Turns out I was wrong. Brenda's name lit up on the phone around noon. I let it ring twice, then answered. She's expecting again. Her tone tried to sound casual, but the words came like a weight placed gently, then pressed down. "You're missing everything, Mom." I wiped the rim of the counter with the hem of my sleeve. "She was glowing yesterday. It's a girl. You don't feel, I don't know, left out." I poured another cup of tea, let the steam rise. "I don't feel left in either." A pause. Then, "Why do you talk like that now?" I leaned against the sink, the ceramic cool against my wrist. "Because now I only speak when I mean it." Another pause. Shorter. "I don't understand you anymore." I touched the edge of my wedding ring box with one finger. Maybe I didn't either, for a very long time. She didn't hang up, but the silence stretched thin. Eventually, the call ended without a goodbye. That was fine. I opened the drawer beside the stove and took out the ring. The gold had dulled over time. The inscription inside, nearly faded R+P always. I didn't cry. I didn't polish it. Instead, I placed it inside a small wooden box I had carved myself in a community class. On the lid, I stuck a label before I chose myself. No ceremony, just a line. At lunch, I shared roasted squash and lentils with Elaine under the patio umbrella. She told me about a recipe she forgot midway through, so she improvised with peaches and balsamic. It worked, she said, because she didn't panic. I nodded. There was something in that. Later, I carried a book into the garden. Its spine cracked when I opened it, the pages whispering apart like they'd been waiting too long. I read slowly, letting the lines sit where they landed. Around me, bees moved from bloom to bloom without apology. When the breeze turned, the page flipped ahead. I didn't go back. I let it lead. I closed the book and laid it across my lap. My eyes followed the lines of shadow stretching from the tree trunk to the stone path. I didn't move. I didn't explain. I didn't rehearse what I would say if someone called. For once, I didn't owe anyone anything, and that finally felt like enough.